Hello, everybody. Welcome again to The Way Through. I'm your host, Bonnie Worth. I'm so grateful to have a chance to chat with you here again today. Of course, this show is being offered to you through the lens of mediumship, taking a look at it from a metaphysical standpoint in terms of the challenges that we have in our life. We're looking at the human condition, what makes us who we are, and how do we show up in through co-creation to begin to shift and change some of the results, of course, that we have in our life, and more importantly, to create a life that we love to live. And so every week we have conversations, or it's my greatest hope, conversations that are supporting you to navigate your way through whatever challenges are coming up, to give you a really great, wonderful understanding of your humanity, while at the same sense of it being able to give you some tips and some tools and things to help you to really shift your approach in terms of maybe how you're the choices you're making. Shift your approach on your choices. Let's just keep it simple. All right, so today's conversation, we are talking about emotional boundaries today, which are really this is, again, every conversation is such a big conversation. This is really important, not only because of our the fast-paced, demanding world that we live in, but more importantly, when we look at it in terms of being an energy sensitive, the impact of what, not only our physical boundaries that we have, and our boundaries with the non-physical world, but also looking in terms of our emotional boundaries. Such an important and crucial thing for us to be able to have in place, to be able to articulate and to uphold even for ourselves. So our emotional boundaries are basically our personal limits. It's how we protect and our feelings, our emotional energy, which is such an important piece. And more, it's not it really establishes, I think, when we look at boundaries, this how we invest our time and energy in other people. We establish how it is that we expect to be treated. But I want to say, more importantly, I think instead of the expectation of being treated, it is what we know in how we are worthy of being treated that ultimately becomes the basis of this and the basis of this whole conversation. So, by learning to safeguard our emotional space, getting control of our energy, recognizing that we always have choice in terms of even the energy that we're choosing to participate in, it really are the things that can not only, of course, improve our relationships and reduce our overall stress, but it makes significant, improvements to our overall well-being in terms of how we're able to show up in the world, how we sleep at night, and really about where, the state of the emotional overwhelm that so many empaths can struggle with, to the point of being empowered within your sensitivity and being able to, really navigate again the life and everything that comes up along the way. So our emotional boundaries really are our personal limit. It's how we maintain our emotional well-being. It's how we create emotional balance. And when we look in terms of, cultivating authentic resilience, this is a big factor in it. The emotional balance that we need to be able to uphold and sustain is such an important thing. The emotional roller coaster, the highs and the lows, the ups and the downs, are really, really difficult on our system, on our nervous system, on our energetic system. So being able to create a way for us to be able to sustain and balance our emotional bodies and our emotional selves is really, such a key element in what is our overall well-being, and being able to even move beyond what has been the past, the struggles that we've had, the stories, the narratives, the things that we hold within our belief systems, our, I would say, our overall concept of what we're worthy and deserving of in our life. And our emotional bodies, in terms of the aspects of emotional boundaries, we can look at, one, this really comes into, when I talk about personal space, I don't mean your physical space, although there you might need physical boundaries in place. What I'm talking about, personal, the spaciousness of our within our energy. This is about understanding our needs, our feelings, and also, establishing what we're willing to tolerate in our life, and what's acceptable, and where those limits are for us energetically and otherwise. When we look at establishing emotional boundaries, this is the ultimate in what we could say is an expression of our own self-respect, our own self-compassion. When we're valuing our emotional needs, we're speaking to how we feel. We're speaking to the impact that our stories, our traumas, our experiences life have had on us. And so being able to acknowledge our feelings, acknowledge, again, instead of moving into that suppressive factor that I've talked about previously on the shows, is about, coming in. So we're not dismissing them, we're not invalidating them, but we're also being able to come forward into relationship with other people where our feelings and emotions are not being dismissed or invalidated either. This is, I think of, how many relationships over the years that have come and gone in my life. And a big factor, for me has really been the showing up as a spiritual empath, being there for others, giving my heart, my compassion, my help, my everything to someone, and it not being reciprocated, or that how I felt being dismissed or being judged, being judged even for having feelings or being human. That so we look at having emotional boundaries as a way that we respect ourselves, that we nurture ourselves, and we care for ourselves, and at times when maybe other people aren't expressing a sense of care or compassion towards us. Communication, this is a key factor as well. Instead of diminishing our voice and holding back and swallowing the impact that again, the impact of our experiences, swallowing our words, biting our tongue, all of those things, being able to, when we have emotional boundaries in place, we're able to really begin to express our feelings a little bit easier. We can, again, our needs and those limits, but honestly it includes that, instead of that constant yes, 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 that so many of us, especially when we look at the broader, what would be healing community, as I said, this based on spiritual empaths, the people who are on the front line, who are here to serve and to help and support other people in the world. This is our ability to not only show up and help in those times of needs, but it's also in our capacity to be able to say no when necessary, in terms of honoring our, what we're capable of continuing to give, or how we're able to continue to help other people. And no is actually not a bad word. No is a part of what helps us to say, that we're full, we can't offer any help and support. It's like, no, I'm sorry, I can't help you right now. No, I'm sorry, that's not going to work for me. No, that is not really how I see things. Being able to, to say it, and not from a place, I want to say, in a place of being firm or affirmative in it, but not assertive. This is not about aggressive communication whatsoever, because aggression really is from a place of reaction instead of what is response to the situation or response to the other person, even in, some of those challenging conversations we may have. When we have emotional boundaries in place, we become really aware of other people, really aware of other people, maybe in, recognizing a sense of when we're being manipulated. In fact, when I look back, I remember at one point in time, my brother-in-law had said to me, he says, "You are so easily manipulated, Bonnie." He said, "You are, there are things that are happening. It's like you just fall for everything." And I guess in some way, he was right. I do have a sense of naivety to me, and I guess I always expect the good in everyone, or more importantly, I don't know if it's an expectation, but I have a tendency to see the good in everyone. And so as as a spiritual empath, I think that's one of the things that really stands out for us, is that we do see the good. We see the good behind the facade. We see the good behind the illusion. We see what sits at the core of the individual, and to the point that sometimes it becomes challenging, where we can't recognize when we are being manipulated or taken advantage of. And again, it's that overcoming need that we have. And I don't want to say a need in terms of neediness, but this need to be of service, this need to fulfill something bigger than who we are in this life. But it's incredibly challenging. It's incredibly challenging for anyone, when we look at those people who are the compassionate people who care, who are empathetic to other people, and it becomes a really without any emotional boundaries, it becomes challenging to recognize those times when that can be occurring or taking place. And I mean, ultimately, like boundaries of any kind, physical boundaries, our spiritual boundaries that we have, even in terms of the non-physical world. But establishing boundaries, especially emotional boundaries, really helps to create very healthy relationships. It's supportive relationships. We're no longer in relationships where we're being drained, exhausted, or again being taken advantage of. So when we look at establishing our emotional boundaries, it's not from a place of selfishness, but in a way that we're able to take care of ourselves, as I said earlier, in ways that maybe other people aren't capable of caring for us. But more importantly, to ensure that we are able to help, we are able to serve, we can show up and make a positive difference, in our world. And I say a positive difference in the world, not necessarily in terms of the larger world stage, but the positive difference in our families, our communities, in our close, intimate circles, where we can, show up again in the best possible way, for us to be present with ourselves and to be present with others. We can look at energy and the emotional energy that's out there. We can and to understand that everything is energy, and for everything that goes on in the world around us, there is an energy that is at play, and that energy at play is very entangled in terms of the emotional energy of the collective. So when you're coming in and you're tuning into these shows every week with me, and you're a part of the growth of the Empower channel, this is really, we're looking at how do we empower humanity to move forward? How do we begin to make instrumental changes within our own life that are going to impact and help us to be not only productive in society, but in contribution to society in a way that maybe we've neglected or we haven't attended to in the past. And when we look at, in the recent years, all of the tumultuous interplay of the political unrest, the wars, the natural disasters, everything that happens, we can look at some of the mass shootings, and I mean, I don't have to get into the details of all of the traumas that have taken place globally for us, and through our media we're so connected and impacted. And so we're connected and impacted because we it's our emotional well-being that is entangled. These global events really influence for us. They resonate deeply with our own humanity, but they affect our mental health, our emotional stability, and that overall, of course, sense of safety in the world. And when we look at even the current political landscape, and I'm not going to get into detail of, we all know what's playing out in the world around us, but the political landscape is becoming increasingly polarized. And what that's doing is, even though there are, it's activism for positive change, it also is leading to heightened anxiety. There is, the instability is creates feelings of fear and helplessness, and the rhetoric really, creates even greater division, so to speak. It creates the climate that really, where we become so conflicted with or entrenched with belief systems, and those some individuals who are less empathetic towards different viewpoints, or it's challenging. But just to know and understand that even this has an impact on us, that this is an atmosphere that leads to our emotional fatigue. Why are we waking up exhausted and tired in the morning? Why do we feel like some days we can't function and complete some of the simplest tasks? Is to understand that the emotional energy, it's not just the emotional content of our own being, but it's the emotional content of all beings everywhere that are really influencing our capacity to function healthfully, to be able to thrive. We can consider, the war. I mean, these are cycles that we see happening within our world, and there is significant emotional trauma trauma that is a part of, a part of what extending to, we don't have to be in the war zone in order to be impacted by it. It's impacting our collective consciousness. It's creating a shared sense of grief, and it's like it's contributing to the anxiety disorders. It's contributing to the post-traumatic stress and depression that so many individuals are challenged by or working through. And maybe that's even you in terms of your own life, of the things that you're trying to find your feet and trying to make choices and decisions for yourself to begin to create a healthier way of being and living. But just to know that when you are energetically sensitive, that you can be very affected by that conflict. You can be feeling the repercussions. It's so widespread. And I think it's a bit of an illusion to think that because we're on the other side of the world, we're not affected or it doesn't involve us. It absolutely involves us. It involves us in every way, shape, or form. And it is, as I said, it's a part of what contributes to the override or the increase of what is so much anxiety and fear-based consciousness, and the stresses that are, in the world around, or maybe even what we deal with on a daily basis. It takes a serious toll on our emotional well-being. And we can look at, natural disasters having, that ongoing state of hypervigilance and alertness. It's overwhelming. And we look at the aspects of, the earthquakes, the wildfires. We've had so many wildfires here in Canada, of course, every summer it seems. And there's been significant loss with it. And so that's disrupting communities. It's creating displacement. It's, people are wrestling with grief and loss, and it's overwhelming to what is our functional coping capacities. And when I say our functioning coping capacities, I mean it's overwhelming to that innate sense of resilience that we have. It's like, even in, and I've talked about that. If you're first time tuning into the show, I encourage you to go back and listen to the previous show called Authentic Resilience, where it's, we have this ability to suck it up, to be strong, to move through these things that occur and happen. And yet they take a real significant toll on us. And it becomes overwhelming for us to even be able to navigate within our own innate coping capacities. This is where, again, we have to look at how do we nurture ourselves, and how do we start making choices, decisions, and what are we participating in? That's a really important factor, because all of it really is significant in terms of how we feel and how we're able to show up and function in our own lives. And so we can't overlook this. I think this is a part of, in some ways, that I would say the vast part of maybe society, or the where we look at the energy of our communities and the energy of our own personal traumas, how that affects us, how it affects our ability to move beyond and out of what is the negativity or the suffering that occurs in our life, into a place of where we can find the ease, the happiness, and have a little bit, I would say, grace has been my favorite word as of lately. But how do we cultivate grace, and how do we give ourselves grace, and how do we allow for grace for, everyone who is in a state of suffering based on our own human condition, and of course what's happening in the greater world around us. It all has an impact. And when we don't have emotional boundaries, even what's happening on the larger world stage is affecting us. It's not just, again, this spaciousness that I talked about, our own personal space and what's happening in our personal lives. This is personified in terms of the experiences at the world, as a whole. And so we need to take a look at, yes, what do we have control of, and what is it that what choices can we make in this, where we are right now in this moment, and how we can function and find our way to greater stability, cultivating that authentic resilience and creating emotional balance for ourselves. And so, this is where, again, establishing emotional boundaries is essential for regaining our energy, regaining a sense of well-being in our life, especially when there's so much upheaval and uncertainty playing out everywhere around us. So this is, we look at, how do we move forward in this? How do we create it so that we can function and be well and take care of the things that we need to take care of our inner landscape, of the feelings, of the memories, of the previous, traumas that are being impacted and triggered as a result of what we see happening, in the external world around us. And it's, I think, in some way naive to believe that we're all going through life right now without being affected by it. And we might not, we might be consciously affected by what's happening, or we might be unconsciously affected, but irregardless, there is an impact that is taking place. And so it is significant in terms of what it causes in terms of our ability to function and thrive, and the complexity of how we feel, the complexity of why we're emotional, and why the shifts and changes that are taking place, even in, we would say, in the cosmic atmosphere, are having such a profound impact on us. It's because everything is within the confines of an energy experience, and we're all participating within an energy based on the emotional content. Emotions our energy in motion. And so to understand that we have, as humans, that's really what, sets us apart from every other species that's out there, is we have an emotional container, we have an emotional body, and that those emotions are either contributing positively to our life, or they're contributing in a negative connotation. And that's no different when we consider the greater world stage, or the things that are happening all around us. So regaining a sense of control. I think this is, our ego loves control. Oh my gosh, our egos love to be control. We know why. We want to know why it's happening, when it's happening, how it's going to happen, what's going to play out. We want to be able to define exactly the steps to take and what the end result is going to be. But here's the thing, we actually realize that we actually aren't in control. And I think, if anything, this is, Mother Nature is so great at helping us to understand that we really are not in control at all, and that there is a governance, or something greater that is, affecting all of us, or that we are being, we're being taken through in some way, or supported in some way that's beyond maybe our even conceptualized understanding of things. So, how do we regain a sense of control? Well, establishing emotional boundaries. It's like the awareness here. Like, how do we know we need boundaries? Well, awareness comes in through the manifestation of anxiety. It's in our irritability, it's in our frustration, it's in our sadness, and it's in our lack of, even at sometimes where we have a lack of empathy towards other people. It's all indications that we are emotionally overwhelmed by the state of life, by the state of the world, by the state of maybe even our own self, our inner state. And so, we take awareness. With awareness, as you've heard me say before, once we have awareness, we're 50% there. Like, we're well on our path to recovery. We are well on our path in terms of being able to transform and shift and experience something new and different for ourselves. And so, awareness, we wait for awareness to be born, but we have to become very consciously aware of what's going on for us in our inner landscape, in our own emotional landscape, because that's going to be an indication when we know that we are in a place of requiring our some boundaries. There's also physical symptoms. We don't want to look over at this either. I mentioned earlier being so exhausted and tired, and some of those stress related ailments. Those are all signals to us. Those are all signals. Our body is such a brilliant messenger, helping us to understand the effect of the external world is having on us, the effect of our own mental and emotional landscape, maybe even based on what we're holding, and what we've inherited, and the paradigms we're operating in, and the impact of what the narratives and stories have been in our lives up until this point. So we need to pay attention. As I said, the body is such a messenger, and to understand at the core of all of this, it's like any tension, any exhaustion, any irritability that sits, even every ache and pain and dis-ease that we have within our physical body, is an indication of there being emotional content that needs to be addressed and needs to be attended to. It's like there's a root cause. Every root cause comes down to something emotional that's going on for us. And when we can get to the root cause, and we can, of course, move into it from a place of even an experiencing of it and being present with it, acknowledging it, then it allows for that expression, right? And so again, looking, you can see how all of these shows are a part of the same conversation, but it's a part of the whole conversation that we need to recognize and be willing to consider when we're considering our own healing journey. And this is another factor in this, right? So we look at emotional boundaries, really are what transcend indulgence. Of it's this is about nurturing an environment for our emotional health, prioritizing maybe self-care, dedicating to ways that we can find relaxation, whether that be through meditation or exercise, journaling, spending time, in nature. Sometimes even just simply taking a break can make a big difference. Finding our breath, being able to breathe and to focus on our inhale and exhale can be a real easy way for us to begin to find a little bit of balance in the emotional landscape. But when we need to look at our boundaries, when we fail to set limits for ourselves, limits not only in terms of what we're doing, but limits in terms of how we're feeling, we can really, get adrift in being able to function and know what we require or even need. And that's the important part to consider here as well. That state of overwhelm, we lose sight of what we actually need. We lose sight of the very things that are going to help and support us in being able to have a sense of stability, or a sense of quote unquote control over what's happening. The only thing we can ever control is how where our mind goes. The only thing we can ever control is what energy we're participating in. We can't control what's happening in the world around us. We can't control other people, God knows, even though there are individuals who try. But we can't. We have the only thing we can control is how we're showing up and the choices that we're making. And to know that as we're doing that, it creates an impact of what would be positive exchange with the universe in the ways that we're able to create and to manifest significant change for our life. But it all starts from within. We can't change the external. We have to address what's going on and be with what's going on. And so how do we find those things that promote what is our overall well-being, so we're not overwhelmed and drained and exhausted by the emotional content of the world or the needs of other people? Well, we do that by establishing emotional boundaries of and be able to not only establish them, but of course to be able to speak them and share them with other people and be able to assert them. So and again, I use assert as a very bold and aggressive word, but it's just being able to communicate them, being able to express them and to uphold them, so that we can find ways to not only communicate our limits, but avoid those feelings that come, when they're without reciprocation in any way. As I talked about, even some of those earlier relationships I had without the reciprocation coming back in terms of, my feelings being, a part of the equation, my needs being a part of the equation. And again, what I'm talking about isn't just a me thing. I'm talking here for every empath everywhere, because you guys understand and know this, right? But we might have friends who continuously seek emotional support without reciprocation, people who need things from us need our help without being there when we require help. Those are the relationships that that come up here. in my memory. But they're dynamic because they're the very things that led me to feeling burnt out and resentful. And resentment is a part of our human condition. And for us to fall into a state of resentment is and burnout and exhaustion is an indication that we require some emotional boundaries, that we need to preserve our emotional energy in some way so that we can and I want to say you have control here again, control at least over our emotional landscape of what's going on, of what's happening right within us. And so what we're this is pivotal. This is pivotal in being able to move into a state where we can focus on our well-being, where we can declutter our minds, and we can, really fall into what's going on inside of us and what do we need. It's not the why did something happen and why is this person being mean and why are they always asking for help. It becomes what do I need in this moment and what do I require in order to have a healthier relationship with this in person, or what do I require today that I'm not maybe allowing myself or giving myself permission to fall forward into. And so we look at what becoming the powerful ally for us in our trauma recovery, as well as when we're dealing with the emotional overwhelm of life, the emotional overwhelm of our own content that sits inside of us. And I want to talk a little bit about our emotional landscape inside, because the stories, the narratives, the traumas and experiences that we've had in our life, they have an emotional impact. And that emotional impact, as I said, when it sits in the body, it manifests into illness and disease. But more importantly, that emotional impact needs to be recognized. It mattered. What happened mattered. We matter. And being able to honor, how we feel and what's going on inside of us is ultimately the most important part of our healing journey, the most important piece that's going to help to move beyond the content of what our life had been previously, to begin to, release, to let go, to heal, in order so that we can receive the life that we're working so hard to create and to live. And so we have to understand that we can't continue just to suck it up and move forward and pretend things out of reality. That's not going to work. To pretend that these things haven't happened and that we weren't impacted and we weren't hurt and we weren't wounded is one, it's denying our very humanity and it's denying our very creator. So we look at it, just recognizing that this is important, that we matter, that what happened mattered, and we must address it and take a look at what's sitting within the emotional landscape that is causing us to feel like we're not worthy, and causing us to feel like we're not good enough, and causing us to feel like there's no hope. I just I have had so many conversations over this last couple of weeks. I would say this last couple of months, really, with a lot of the clients that I coach, and with the people that I mentor. Just the overwhelm of what life has become, the impact of not only what's happening in right now in their lives and what their challenges are, but the impact of what's triggering in terms of previous experiences in life, and those previous experiences really coming back to what happened in childhood. And this is never, please know that this show is not about blaming our parents, but it is looking at our inherited conditioning. It's about looking at what has happened, not why it happened, not why they did these things, but what happened in our childhood to make us believe that we weren't worthy. What happened that told us that we didn't matter? What happened that resulted in us feeling like we weren't capable of the things that we're looking to actualize for our life? So we have to look back, we have to reflect, we have to go into the our childhoods to take a look at the very things that caused us to believe the things that we've believed, and of course to challenge everything we believe, and is it really us? I think this is where again we look at it from an emotional container, where what if what if what we're feeling and experiencing in this moment, what if it's not us? What if there is something that we're carrying that we've inherited based on past or previous experiences in our life, but maybe what we've inherited, even right now in this moment based on the energies that are at play in the world around us. We have to be very conscientious of understanding that as energy sensitives, we are constantly connected to, interacting with energy, and the energy of the past, the energy of the feelings that we've suppressed. All of it matters and all of it needs to be recognized. It's a part of why we have chronic stress and chronic anxiety and chronic pain. All of that is because of what is sitting within our emotional well. What's in the well? What is it that is deep down, that that it's like what's stale and stagnant, and at the what's the sludge at the bottom, of the hole. And we need to get down there. We need to go deep into that and to feel it and to be present with it and to allow it to be a part of of our makeup, of acknowledging it. We need to acknowledge it, even if the people who hurt us or wounded us won't ever acknowledge it. They won't ever, maybe they won't ever apologize. That's definitely, sometimes that's what happens. People just are so oblivious to what they've said or what they've done of having any impact, or they just think, here again, because of this innate resilience, oh, you'll just get over it, or how many times have you heard it, just get over that already. That's another thing that we say to ourselves and to other people. And I mean, it's, is it helpful? No. Not at all. It's not helpful at all. But we need to, what the atmosphere is within our emotional content, the atmosphere of our being. And when we look at, this is why looking back into our childhood, and if you've coached with me, if you're doing any of the deeper work, then it's, I was like, what happened to make you feel this? When did it happen? And very often the impact of our experiences, where we led to believe we were unworthy, or we led to believe that we didn't matter, or where we were conditioned to believe that our needs were not important. All of those are impacted within the first 7 years of our life. That if we go back, if we're doing any inner child work whatsoever, if we're finding an age, well, this happened to me at 20, and this happened to me at 16, and this happened to me at 10. It doesn't say that that doesn't matter. Of course it mattered, but there was something previous that led to that experience, something previous that had created, based on the conditioning, whether it was personal beliefs and paradigms that we were participating in, whether those were indirect or direct for us. There is content there, and that content is really, from the most impressionable years, that 0 to 7 years, where we take on the world, where we are conditioned out of that pure state of consciousness that we're born with. This is where, when babies are born, we just, we gather. We can't get enough of them. We just want to breathe them in, because they're such pure positive vibration. They're such pure positive love. They're coming direct from source, direct from, creator. And so we have these beautiful babes, and then these beautiful babes come into life, and they come into human form. And as part of our human conditioning, we condition them based in those first 7 years of life. We condition our children, and we've been conditioned. It's what happens, and for karmic reasons, and based on soul contracts, and all of the factors. But to look back, when we're looking at our own personal healing, we've got to go back. And even if we can't remember exactly what happened, even being able to identify and simply say, there was something at 3 years old. I get the feel. I just, three comes to mind. I was 3 when this happened. You might not know exactly what happened, but that knowing, that remembering, it's where it was defined. It was where it was decided. It was where we chose to take on the paradigm or the belief that was placed upon us. And so when we go back into the deeper healing parts of it, we take a look at what's sitting there. What was the deciding factor, and what caused us to believe the things we've come to believe about ourselves and what we believe we're worthy of. And when we go, through the healing, it's like when we look at, this is exactly the point. This was the choice point where we decided it, even if we're deciding it in an unconscious state, because as children, we're pretty oblivious to the fact that we've got a choice point. We're pretty oblivious to the fact that we've got something, that there might be a different way to think about something, right? We're trusting. We are so trusting of the people who are tending to our care, and we're absorbing and taking on the paradigms, the belief systems, the what we're believing about ourselves, but we're also taking on the energy of those experiences as well. This was really an important factor for me when I look at healing through my own traumas, was to understand that as an energy sensitive, not only was I dealing with the psychological, the mental and emotional container of my own human nature, but I was also processing and holding on to and being impacted by the emotional content of those experiences, of whether they were experiences that I was directly involved with, or even it was an indirect experience. I was still participating and being affected by the energy of that, and that energy gets locked in our system. The memory becomes a cellular memory. It's why something can happen in our life now and we're triggered back, because we might not remember it on our mind. We might not have a memory of what happened. And especially if you're someone like me, who's suffered from complex PTSD, and you may not even recall what exactly happened, but the feeling of it sits there. The feeling is in the cells. The feeling is in the body. And when we look at our healing, we've got to understand that it's all faceted in terms of our mental, our emotional, our physical, our energetic, our spiritual. Everything gets affected. Trauma and these experiences that we have, and throughout our life, and especially in those most impressional years, we hold it inside of us. And it, again, it's what contributes to the overall burdens and stresses. And really, when we're going, why can't I handle what's happening in the world? Why am I at my emotional limit here? Why is it that I'm so stressed out, maxed out, exhausted, emotional, depressed, and feeling like I can't function? It's because not only are we in witness of what's happening in the greater world stage around us, it's triggering the very things that happened that we may not even remember. It's triggering the very things that are sitting within our cellular makeup. And it's causing, again, us to feel, all the things that we feel. So I know I want to really honor, of course, the time on this show. And this is such a big conversation. Every conversation is a bigger conversation. So how do we establish emotional boundaries? So one, as I said earlier, the awareness that we need them. That's the very first thing. So this is, again, we need to prioritize our self-care. That really is what creates groundwork for meaningful interactions in ways that are balanced, where we have reciprocation. Our boundaries are what helps us to feel grounded and rooted in who we are. It's an expression of how we love ourselves, how we respect ourselves, how we're supporting ourselves, and we can trust. We fall into trust. We may not be able to trust other people. We may not be able to trust in what's happening in the world around us, and but we can trust ourselves. And when we establish boundaries, this is one of the ways that we begin to trust ourselves. And at least, here again, we've got some aspect of control that ultimately, for our ego, is the most important thing. Having a boundaries, it's where we're respecting, I said, ourselves, our needs, our feelings. We're creating some personal space so that we can have more, we can become more compassionate for the one who's enduring, the one that, where we're not being led to that unhealthy dependency on other people, that, the codependency, which can be so predominant for empaths, where we become codependent on other people because we're so, attending to their needs all the time, that it begins to feed us in some way. Again, I'm going to do another show on this. Every conversation is a bigger conversation, right? But we begin to look at, we need boundaries when we're feeling resentment, when we have the internal emotional, emotional turmoil going on for us. And, we look at the barrage of things that are impacting us and rendering us to feel like we have, we're existing in negativity. And I mean, this is especially important when we look at, things that are happening in the world around us. And when we don't have emotional boundaries, we're vulnerable to being manipulated, the emotional exploitation, that can take place, and the toxicity within our relationships becomes, even more challenging for us. So, we look at how do we protect ourselves and how do we navigate these relationships? Well, this is about nurturing that authentic resilience. The authentic resilience, as I said, through the awareness. But we need to reflect. We need to reflect on our feelings. Why are we feeling this way? Identify what's making us uncomfortable. What is causing the stress for us in this relationship? And understanding, what boundaries that we need, what are needed. And so, in a boundary, self-awareness can even be this point of a boundary that says, I can't have this conversation right now. I need to step back and I need to take 5 minutes. I just need 5 minutes. Can be a great way to begin to honor the emotional contents. We can find our breath, that we can regulate our nervous system. Sometimes we just need a time out from the stressor that's taking place for us, so that it's not becoming a liability or a limitation, but it's becoming this invitation for us to be able to address, how we're feeling. And when we can say no, and say, no, I'm not able to help you out with that. Or we can say, I just need to step out of this for right now. I need a personal timeout. When we're able to do that, it ultimately saying, I feel very overwhelmed right now with what's happening. Or, this is not a way that I'm okay with being treated. And I need to step back from this, looking at ways that we can communicate that, and being honest. I think honesty is the key to everything. And even though, we might be practicing saying no, it's important to know, it is uncomfortable to start doing it. And when someone isn't aligned with the boundaries that we have, it can create us, we might feel guilty, and it's common to feel guilty when we're starting to express boundaries. But we also need to remind ourselves that our emotional health is important, and it's okay to prioritize our needs. And we need to be prepared for the reaction, because not everyone is going to respond positively to our boundaries. There may be some pushback, but it's such an important thing to really, honor and really stand in our worthiness, to know the stance of what is emotionally supportive for us, what is in our well-being. And being able to, you know just express it, and to remind ourselves that, we don't need to feel guilty about this, that we matter, that we're worthy of time out, that we can articulate our boundaries in very kind and polite ways. We can say no in very, kind and polite ways. This doesn't have to become volatile and aggressive. And if it is becoming volatile and aggressive, it's just an indication that time out and the boundary, first time out, and I'll come back to this conversation, and the very fact that there is a boundary needs to be articulated. If we're feeling that, and we're getting into a reactive state, that it's really a really big indication that we are not taking care of our own emotional needs. Okay. So we need to review. We need to consider what's going to serve us. What do we require? And how do we feel? And more importantly, how do we want to feel? That really becomes ultimately in setting them, and then being able to express them. And like I said, not everybody's going to be okay with this, and that's okay. It's okay if they're not okay. But it's more important that that you find your way to what is going to support your needs most, what is going to help, and not from a narcissistic standpoint. This is that, the empath and a narcissist, that's a whole conversation for another day. But just to know that it's not from a narcissistic standpoint. It's not saying I'm needy and it's all about me. It's just saying I matter, and I need to take up some space in my own life, and I need to nurture myself right now so I can be there for you. And I need to honor this emotional landscape, and I'm overwhelmed, and I'm feeling sad, and I'm processing a lot right now. And I just need a holding space, and I need to love myself, and I need to take care of myself right now. And prioritizing that, because again, why? Because we're worthy. We're worthy of being nurtured. We're worthy of healing. We're worthy of honoring how we feel. and having our needs honored as well. And of course, it starts with us. Everything that plays out in our life begins and ends with us, not from an egoic aspect, but in what's going on internally. What is the inner landscape? How are we functioning, and how are we showing up? And you know what? If we're sad and depressed and we're really struggling, just yes, it's okay. Nurture yourself. Be present with yourself. Let yourself go through that. And of course, more importantly, reach out if you need help. Community is such a medicine, or having people or someone, in your corner to support you when things are challenging. Find that person, and that person, maybe that person is me, and I would of course love to be able to help and support you in whatever way I can. All right, sweet friends, I so love hanging out with you every Friday. I love, thank you, thank you, thank you for tuning into the show, for being a part of these conversations, and just knowing that, I see you, I feel you, I know what you're going through, and we're in this collectively together. We are a part of this in terms of the becoming of what, the future, looking at, but in order to move forward into the future, in order to navigate and to find our way through ultimately to the other side of this, we also need to take a look at what it is that happened in the past. What is it that we need to acknowledge and understand about ourselves, and what do we need? And more importantly, to know that we are absolutely worthy. We are worthy, worthy, worthy of the joy, of the peace, and of ease in our life. So from my heart to yours, thank you so much. I love that you enjoyed the conversations today, and I really, love that I get to hang out with you. Please, 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 if this show really impacted you, something I said really helped, please, comment, like, and share, and share this with a family, a friend, someone who may benefit from the conversation as well. And I really, help me in the sense of getting the message out to the world and to those people who need it the most by, being a part of it through your participation, through your liking, your commenting, and your sharing. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate, of course, every chance and opportunity I have to tune in and be here with you too. All right, everyone, until next week. Bye bye.